Hello, my name is Jeanette Rojas, and I work with the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. Welcome to our training, Understanding Structural Racism in Montgomery County. This land acknowledgement was created by the Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee. The Racial Equity and Social Justice Advisory Committee acknowledges that we live and work upon the stolen lands of the Piscataway Conoy Tribal Nation. We affirm the need to share that history of the rightful past, present, and future inhabitants of the land. This would include the Accohannock Indian tribe, the Assateague People tribe, the Nas-Waiwash Band of Indians, the Piscataway Conoy Confederacy and subtribes, and the Cedarville Band of Piscataway Indians, the Pocomoke Indian Nation, and the Youghiogheny River Band of Shawnee Indians. We acknowledge the thousands of tribal members in our community that are displaced from their own homelands and have moved to Montgomery County. Why are we here today? We have been given a narrative about power, privilege, and opportunities through our media, our communities, and through our own family and friends. Often the narrative, which is built upon and reinforced by policies and laws, tells us that certain groups of people are not trying hard enough and don't care, and as a result are less valuable or deserving of power, privilege, and opportunities. But we know through our first training, Advancing Racial Equity in Local Government, that these narratives require interrogation and critique. And we must remain curious about why some groups of people remain marginalized while others continue to prosper. How does data help us understand the pervasive racial inequities that are part of one of the most diverse and prosperous counties in the country? Today in Montgomery County, we like to celebrate the rich diversity of our communities and the great work that we do to serve these communities. Just this past year in 2023, 4 Montgomery County cities ranked in the top 10 most ethnically diverse cities in the entire country: Gaithersburg, Germantown, Rockville, and Silver Spring. So, how did we get here? The increased focus in our work around the topic of racial equity and social justice was largely propelled by local organizing and advocacy and the events and social unrest of the last few years. The deaths of Black citizens at the hands of police, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, the rise of anti-Asian sentiment and attacks that resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic, or the recent spike in anti-Semitic incidents, including here in our county, have resulted in calls for more to be done to address racism. As institutions, organizations, and governments have met this challenge head on, we have also seen counter movements attempting to squash this work. Just as Montgomery County commits to end racism and reduce racial inequities, concerted efforts across the country are challenging work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, as manifested here on this map that shows in turquoise where states have successfully banned critical race theory and similar trainings to this one. In Montgomery County, we made a commitment to fight racism head on. This was manifested in the 2019 Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. It established an Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. It requires all employees to receive 8 hours of racial equity training. It requires each department and office to establish a racial equity social justice action plan. It requires the Office of Legislative Oversight to submit a RESJ impact statement for each bill. It established a Racial Equity and Social Justice Committee, and it requires that each department appoint a racial equity and social justice point person or lead. The last 3 to 4 years have changed the landscape of racial equity and social justice. But now we are again at a crossroads where the challenge of uplifting marginalized voices and taking action needs to be prioritized. Sometimes people can't see a close connection between their work and this topic of systemic racism. It's important that we realize that we all have a role to play in challenging and breaking down the barriers established by systemic racism and ensuring that everyone in the county feels like they belong. First of all, it's crucial that we all understand what the issue is. What is systemic racism? How does it impact our lives on a day-to-day basis? It's also important that we realize that no matter our role in our county government, we are all impacted by systemic racism. And we all have a responsibility to think critically about how our work impacts the communities that we serve. Systemic racism is pervasive and plays out in our decision making, in our policies, and in our everyday interactions, whether we realize it or not, whether we intended to or not. This is an opportunity to help folks understand the local context for what propelled this work and that it's tied to a larger network of jurisdictions in the region and in the country. Our work around racial equity is based on this framework developed by the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, or GARE. It's a cyclical process whereby we focus on normalizing definitions and historical analysis by prioritizing racial equity and social justice work through resource allocations and investments, organizing our core teams and racial equity champions within departments, and operationalizing racial equity tools in departments and rethinking our organizational structure to ensure that racial equity and social justice are embedded in policies, programs, procedures, and practices.